Well, hello there, and welcome to Prolix, Comix, Bollix, the show where myself, Nick, and himself.
Sorry, the show in which I have a coughing fit. Um, it's me, Clive Davis, and I'm fine. It's all right. Go on.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good to hear, Clive. So yeah, this is the show
If this
where.
was a film, this would be the foreshadowing, right? That I get cancer or something
Oh,
at the end of the film.
yes, the black. Yeah. So by the end of the podcast, you will be coughing blood into a handkerchief for
I'm
sure.
dead. It'll just be you talking to a pine box.
Okay, all right. So yes, so this is the show where you and I talk at length, ad nauseum about all things sequential, uh, and arty.
Hmm.
Um, so
I don't think we talk in any other mode rather than ad nauseam, to be honest.
that's true. That's
Yeah.
true.
It is
Yes,
our
brevity.
default setting, right?
Brevity is the friend of not us.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah. So this time on the show, I have chosen to do the first 10 issues of Savage Sword of Conan, and I already have an admission to make. I've only read the first nine because there's two issue number nines, which is very confusing to me. And I still don't know why there
Okay.
was in
My
the file.
confession, I only got to number 8.
Perfect. Okay,
Right.
which is shit. So we'll yeah, that was a great place actually to stop.
Yeah, well, you
But
did
then
warn me. And then of course it just I don't know. I mean, we'll get to it. I feel as if we had a slightly different overall take on
potentially, yeah.
Savage
Um,
Sword of Conan.
yeah.
Which,
So
correct me if I'm wrong.
yeah.
I seem to remember, is this not Barack Obama's favorite comic of all time or something?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Right.
And one which he like credits with helping him figure out, world politics and all that stuff, which is just
Wow.
very
Okay.
disturbing. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it'll be kicking off a mini series of where we'll be talking former president's favorite comics.
yes,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
on next week's
Um,
show, we'll be talking about LBG's obsession with Chester the Molester.
yes, yes. Well, was the LBJ the one who used to constantly get his dick out and show people? I feel like
Um,
I
I
feel like
is really
I feel like it. Yes, Lyndon B. Johnson.
as we
Yeah.
all
Anyway,
know, it's gospel. It's in the history record. We know he did fuck JFK's head wound on the plane. Um, that's for sure.
who the fuck spread that rumor? Was
Is this
Paul?
someone from Oz or something like that? Like one of those prankster guys, isn't it? I think
Yes. Yeah.
Abby Hoffman or someone like that.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Um, that's what a great way to start this episode about Conan. So, so Savage Sword of Conan is was a full-sized magazine, usually black and white. And this was a period of time when Marvel Comics was kind of experimenting with circumnavigating the comics code
Right.
authority. And if you published your stuff in black and white and at magazine size, you didn't have to abide by the much stricter rules of what you could and couldn't show.
Right.
If you were
This is
dealing with it.
the Curtis imprint, right?
Yes, yeah.
Also
And so
put
I,
out Deadly Hands of Kung Fu and
mhm,
the Planet of the Apes comic as well, which I've
yes,
never read. I mean, was the Planet of the Apes comic like racy?
I have no idea.
Because I like the idea of racy apes. I have to say,
Yeah, I don't know. Um,
any apes mating with human captor kind of stuff. I mean, judging by the tone of this, maybe not, because we'll get
Probably
in,
not.
we'll get into how this is. Yeah, I can see how it's I can see why they adopted this format. Correct me if I'm wrong. There was an earlier Marvel run of
Yes,
Conan, right?
yes,
But it
which
was
was a regular
more
size comic, and it was
right,
Comics Code Authority.
right, right.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah, so this, so I yeah, obviously it's there's more permitted here than would have been in that comic. And was it Savage Tales? Was that the first title where this iteration of Conan began, right?
Yes.
Which is also where Man-Thing started, right? Apparently.
Yes, yeah. And I think maybe Khazar as well. There was a few other kind of barbarian adjacent things going on. But yeah, so one of the things that's
Khazar is more of a Tarzan-y thing, isn't it?
Yeah, right. Yeah. But then I think what's weird for me is that although like these things were running kind of simultaneously, and occasionally we get bits of stories that are continuations of things that appeared elsewhere in these first 10 issues of Savage Sword of Conan. So they kind of assumed that you were buying the other stuff as well, which for the purposes of me reading this, I wasn't. So
well, I suppose. No, go on, finish your thought, and then because that's something occurred to me.
I was just going to say that, like, I do remember buying the occasional issue of Savage Sword of Conan, probably secondhand, in the 80s. Well,
it came out 74 until, I don't know when it finished, but there's like almost 300 issues of it, right? So
so in the 90s, I think it was monthly.
So it ran a few years then.
Yeah, and so I think like I do remember having issues like when I was a teenager. And it was, in some ways, it was more comfortable to me, I think, than it would have been to some of my friends, because it was black and white, and it wasn't serialized in that way that you didn't need to buy the next issue. You kind of got a complete story in a way, right? Yes, and it's which I appreciate. I like the fact that it's they're fairly self-contained. And then I would argue, I suspect you're going to argue with me here in a moment about this, but I might like this method of accessing Conan more than any other. I think Conan is really served well by comics. Because I've read all of these stories, right? That was what's interesting to me is since reading Conan comics way back, I've read all of Robert E. Howard's Conan stories. I haven't done all of the other, like Lynn Carter and L. Sprague and all of that stuff. But I have read all of Howard's, and I enjoyed them greatly. But something about
we might actually do them on Literary Effect maybe at some point.
Yeah. And we've talked before, but I'm also a big fan of somebody like Bran McMorn and some of his other like lesser known. But
we should probably, just in case there's anyone who doesn't know, just
who the hell Robert E. Howard is.
Well, just Conan, a barbarian character created by Robert E. Howard in the 30s, right? And Conan the Cimmerian, Conan the Barbarian, Conan the Librarian, famously the only good gag in that UHF.
UHF, yep. I don't know. The ninjas jumping out of the supply closet shouting supplies, is
couldn't do that nowadays.
No.
And correct me if I'm wrong. Was Elmo Phillips the star of UHF? Or am I making that up?
No, Emo.
Yes.
Emo Phillips is in it, but he plays like a confused...
or something, or?
No, so the janitor is played by Michael Richards, later who went on to much bigger fame as Kramer in Seinfeld. Emo Phillips plays a confused woodwork teacher who cuts off his own finger and sprays blood all over the place.
And does the spatula dance? Is that right?
I can't remember.
I'm getting confused because I used to do the spatula dance, and I used to think it was my original dance. Darren can attest to me doing the spatula dance.
Okay.
And then later on, someone clued me in to say, "Oh, that's from me," which I didn't even realize I was copying. It was.
I remember there being
memory, but
a Spatula City gag, like a giant warehouse full of spatulas. So maybe it's part of that bit. But anyway, I've only seen that film twice.
Once or twice too many,
perhaps.
But Conan the Librarian is quite funny. And anyway, so basically about Barbarian, and Robert E. Howard wrote a bunch of these Conan stories, which are very, very good, excellent. Probably the high watermark of that. Well, the pioneer, and still to this day, really, the high watermark of that kind of sword and fantasy stuff.
Yes.
I think, and we'll get to this when we get into the comic a little, I think one of the reasons it's so successful is because it is tinged with it's on the edges of the Lovecraft universe, right?
Yes.
You can almost imagine Conan kind of wandering in, to a Lovecraft story almost at points. Their writing style is quite different, but yeah, like you said, Robert E. Howard also wrote a few, like Bram McMahon, and there's Cull, and there's a few, and Savage Sword of Conan also dips into that well as well every now and again. It's not just strictly Conan stories.
Yeah, no, it's more Robert E. Howard.
But it does adapt original REH stories, right? And so Red Sonja, I didn't have a chance to look this up, and I don't remember. And there was a crap film.
Yes.
And it wasn't. Was there an earlier Red Sonja comic as well?
I think so. And that was, again, that would have been more kid safe or whatever.
Right. But I don't. Is Red Sonja actually a Robert E. Howard?
Yes, but this iteration of her is totally created by Marvel Comics. This idea of her of existing in the same time frame and world as Conan. That's all. Right. That's all malarkey. So I think she appeared in one story, and it's nothing to do with Conan or any of that. It's more of like a 15th century swashbuckling kind of a tale.
Okay.
But they saw, like it feels that way. It also feels like other Robert E. Howard stories are sometimes repurposed here, and they're made Conan stories where they wouldn't have been Conan stories originally.
Yes, exactly. So that's So I wanted a bit of context just in case anyone was like, who's this Conan dude? Like they totally
yes, yeah.
And
poor old Robert was massively prolific for somebody who only lived to 30, right?
Blew his brains out, right?
Yes, yeah. He suffered from I think depression and other mental illness stuff, and then his mom passed away, and he went into a deep spiral, and then he took his own life, which is really too bad because he was actually it's too bad because it's shitty, but it's also he was really hitting his absolute stride.
Yes.
I mean, he spent a long time kind of plugging away and trying to figure it out. He then created Conan, and I remember reading reading something where he talked about the creation of Conan, and he said it was the first time where he started to write, and it was like Conan was at the back of the room just telling him the stories.
Come!
Yeah.
Shut up, Conan, I'm trying to draw. Right.
Yeah. Throwing glasses of beer across the room.
Drink!
But yeah, he said it just poured out like a font of just, so, and he'd finally gotten to the point where he'd even done a novel length story. And I mean, much like a lot of these guys who wrote for Weird Tales, I mean, he was actually far more successful than Lovecraft, right?
Well, he's also worth mentioning he's one of the best, because the thing is, when you go, because it's always tempting when you hear about that era of Weird Tales and there are all these authors and great evocative titles and stuff, and then if you actually go back and read through them, sadly you figure out, actually a lot of this stuff was kind of crap.
Yes,
there's only like a handful of consistently good writers, right? And Robert E. Howard was definitely tip top, right?
Yeah, and he regularly got the cover, right? Whereas I don't think Lovecraft ever got a cover.
No, illustration just only once or something, or like even Clark Ashton Smith or someone like that would have had covers, right? Another one we might want to talk about on Literary Spec.
Definitely. But so in any case, so he but he never lived to see any of it collected into books in the way that Lovecraft didn't either, right? A lot of those guys who wrote for Clark Ashton might be one of the only ones who did live long enough to see his work start to get collected into books.
He did write as well. I remember looking up his bibliography one day. Surprising how many other things he wrote as well, like sports stories, like about baseball and boxing and
all
sorts of things.
Hugely prolific. Always with that manly man.
Absolutely. Apparently you can actually tour nowadays. You can go to like where his old house was is still there, and there's like a little museum, and you can go on a little Robert E. Howard somewhere in Texas, isn't it?
Yeah.
I forget where. Yeah, so if you're in the Texas area, you can go on the Robert E. Howard tour. I don't know what there is to see exactly, but
a giant guy punches you out at the end.
Yeah, might be of interest. I don't know.
But and the other thing that I think is kind of smart and fun about Robert E. Howard and specifically the Conan stories is that they're set in this weird Pangea pre-deluge, so this is that 2,000 years before Babylon, right? And so this is something that I only got from reading these comics this time. I was like, every now and again, he'll swear using the names of Irish gods. Like he'll say, because most of the time it's by Crom. Well, fuck, Crom is an Irish god, right? Crom Cruach is the giant worm god thing, standing stone that supposedly the ancient pagans, killed their children in front of and spilt the blood on the soil to have rich, crops. But then when I started to see other names like Nemain or Maka or Manan MacLear, I was like, why is Conan constantly? And then it was in reading some of it. I didn't read. I will admit, I glaze over. Much as I like my fantasy and stuff like that, when it comes to fake histories of things that I'm just like, I'm good. Yeah. I'm not reading those 4 pages of text. I want to get back to muscly men and cute women, adventuring and vague.
No, there's a lot of that, and as you know, my tolerance is even lower than
lower than mine. Yes.
But
I didn't. I assumed that you would be skipping those sections as well.
Yeah, too much detail about Nembith, the 4th son of Kong, and bringer of the light of the Nagagum.
Yeah.
Not
necessary.
No. Just call him Brian. Yes. Down the road.
But Sumeria, not to be mistaken for Sumeria, where Conan is from, seems to have been a pre-deluge version of Scotland, Ireland.
Right.
And that was something I never got before, because most of the adventures take place in, I guess, more like the Babylonian, Sumerian, area of whatever this world is that Conan inhabits, right?
Yeah, well, it's full of
he's almost never in
lions and pumas and things. So you're like, I don't think they were ever in Scotland, right?
Yeah,
as I know. Yeah, well, no, it's fantasy world, isn't it? I mean, there's no need to get too hung up on exactly where this is set. So my reading is first of all, it's a weird. Like, did you notice like how many ads there are in there for things like, "Are you ready for early retirement?" I'm thinking, who's this? So clearly this was aimed at a slightly older...
I didn't notice those. I noticed all the ones for like, you can learn to kill a man with 2 fingers. Like the number of karate and kung fu school and like just weird like
well, people would be reading the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu comic. Or magazine. No, I noticed how many they were clearly aimed at outside. Okay, so this is really not aimed at children, or rather it is and it isn't. Right? And I think that was my problem with this overall. Well, I have some other problems as well, but I appreciate that it's sexier and more violent than you could have got away with in a comic,
for sure.
But then again, it doesn't go far enough, right? Like if I was an adult thinking about early retirement and starting my own business, and I picked up, I'd want a bit more raunch, like something a bit more European, right?
Sure, but I mean.
So this is a bit.
Would that be true to the page? Would that be true to the page of Weird Tales though? I feel like that. Funnily enough, the stories are always a little bit coy. The text stories themselves.
Yeah, I see what you mean in terms of if you're taking it as, is it an authentic comics representation of Robert E. Howard's work? I would agree with you. I think it probably is more or less by and large, right? but that's one way of looking.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be nice to have seen what was his name? That guy who did that horrifying comic, Ranzarox, Liberator, or the guy who did Druna, Serperi. These are people we'll get into in a later episode. That'll be
Yes,
the
I don't know what you're talking
Prolix,
about. Actually, so
Prolix
yeah.
Comics Bollix for adults, the Blue Light special or whatever.
Yes.
But
Please
yes,
bring that next time, not fucking Conan.
if that's what you want, I can
That's
supply.
what the viewers are demanding.
Is it okay?
Yeah,
all right.
if
Well,
we had any.
shall we do Druna next then? We'll do
Okay,
Druna.
yeah, whatever
Right.
that is. I honestly don't know what
okay.
you're talking about. Yeah.
I will. Yeah, I'll hook you up.
Okay, cool.
It'll in some ways make a nice pairing actually with this.
Okay, that's good. I'm already looking forward to that.
But yeah, I mean, I get what you mean. But the 70s-ness of it all was for me quite charming, I guess.
No, I think I had a weird experience. Yeah, cards on the table just to explain exactly how it went, because this is not a criticism of it. Should mention as well, mostly created by Roy Thomas and John
as writer,
right?
And John Buscema,
yeah.
And then occasional when the inks are really really good, they're by a Filipino artist called Alfredo Alcala, whose work I really love.
Okay. So yeah, so it's weird. So if I'm going to put my objective hat on, I would say there's a lot to. Obviously, the artwork is phenomenal, but apart from when we get to bits of issue 8, which clearly someone gave to their child to complete. So the bit there is quite rough.
It's very fan. It looks very fanish, like an underage, like 14-year-old fan.
All of a sudden, just what now?
Yes, and it's the whole issue. It'd be one thing if it was if it was one thing, but like there's nothing anyway.
Most of it, yeah. But up until that point, at least, like beautiful artwork. I don't have a problem with that at all. I could look at that all day. But and objectively as well, I thought, yes, I see it in the context, and this is definitely a fine iteration of Conan, and it's a good comic and all that. But there was something about it. I think it might have been an overabundance of text, maybe. I mean, I found it quite a stodgy reading experience. Like, it doesn't flow. Plus, as well, you have to remember that I'm forever spoilt in this regard. I mean, everything's in the shadow of Slane.
Yes, but Slane owes such a massive debt to this. I mean, especially
When
you look at the Boris Vallejo.
No, absolutely. On the shoulders of giants and all that, but still, I mean, I would have coming at it post Slane, because I definitely,
I mean, it is truly beautiful. Some of it,
but I just can't. That's what I mean. My objective and subject, like I appreciate it, but at the end of it, just as a fan, as a reading experience,
it doesn't measure up to the horned god.
No, I mean,
very little does in comics.
No, exactly. But specifically, I was thinking just in terms of, like, this is a very stop start reading experience. Like I don't know how you felt about it. I plus as well struggling to read it a little bit. I think I would have got on a bit better with it if I'd had a physical copy. Yeah. But did you at all find that it was a bit text heavy, and also the action stopped as well? Like you'd have these fantastic splash panels and action, and then it would be the equivalent of people speaking in rooms, except it's in like a dungeon or something. But
right,
basically there'd be a bunch of panels of people just yapping, and then it would move. Like it wasn't a smooth reading experience. Like I wasn't drawn to the next issue. Like as for finish an issue, I thought after that. And then,
I mean, that is worth mentioning. They're long, which I hadn't actually realized when I because when I looked at it overall, like if we had done all 10 issues, they're all like 75 to 80 pages long. It's more than I realized. And now that said, we did quite recently do 14 to 17 volumes of like 200 pages a piece
Yeah,
for
but they zipped past.
but and I think that's the thing. So not only are you spoiled maybe by Bisley's work on Slaying the Horned God, you're also spoiled by Japanese comics. Because what you're talking about, that flow, right?
Yeah.
That ability to effortlessly tell a story visually and really only use words when absolutely necessary is something that Japan figured out a long time ago, but the rest of the world is still playing catch up.
Right.
And certainly in the 70s, American comics were still very text bound. And also it's the fact that they're adapted from short stories. You feel like maybe Roy Thomas is being a bit too precious,
yes,
and trying to keep too much of Robert E. Howard's words.
Yes. Right. Again, which I appreciate on one level, but to my point earlier as well, it's like I wish they'd taken off and did their own thing, and then also that you can also make it more raunchy and violent and stuff as well, right? So I mean, I don't know. I've got the complete collection there. I may return. Do you have any idea? Like, for instance, you chose the first 10 issues. Was that just an arbitrary choice?
Yeah, completely. Yeah. I thought we might as well start at the beginning.
Do you have any idea if there's like considered like when Barack
Obama, a golden age?
Yeah, was there like a run that he would have, like, it wasn't necessarily 1 to 10, it was like 25 to 40, or
I will dig in, because I suspect I will. I don't know that I'll read all 300 issues or whatever, but I suspect that I will revisit, because I had more fun with this than I think you did.
Because that's also they're going to run out of Conan stories as well, right? So
well, that's the interesting to do. Yeah, what do they do when there's nothing, and even
there's not that like many
scraps, But then, I mean, there were an enormous number of pastiches written by other authors, and then later on, like some written, based on like notebook single line or whatever, that from Robert E. Howard, and then later on just woven from whole cloth. Like there was lots of writers who went on to be quite well known. Like I think Robert Jordan went on to be quite a well known fantasy author in his own right, but a lot of people cut their teeth writing Conan. I think Del Rey or whatever just endlessly churned out Conan novels all the way through the 70s, 80s, 90s.
Yes.
Because there was always a built-in audience for that, right?
Well, it's all to do with the packaging as well, though, right? Especially in the post Go, John Norman's Go series. You could put all that stuff out with much more salacious covers.
Yes.
For the budding SM enthusiast in WHC.
So it's funny actually. Boris is a guy who this era of his painting is much better than later on. I don't know if you know much about Boris Vallejo, but he's the guy who comes after Frank Frazetta.
Okay. All right. Yes, I am familiar with the name, and covers, right? Covers guy.
Yes. Yeah. But Frazetta is the all-time king of this shit. Frazetta's paintings.
Specifically Conan as well, right? He's considered like the guy who did. Yeah,
he did the covers of those early collected volumes, right? And they're all amazing.
Yeah.
And he had a looseness to his style that was just really, really satisfying. Like it was, all the anatomy was perfect, but yet it wasn't like overly tight. And this is the thing.
Well, those covers definitely influenced Slate.
Oh yeah. But then Boris, like at this point in his career, is basically doing Frazetta pretty well. But if you've ever seen any of Boris's stuff from the 80s and 90s, it gets super, super tight, and it gets really, really like, it's just mannered and yeah.
Well, it's already, I mean, even that stuff is really good. It's already, in comparison, it doesn't have the fluidity of Frazetta. Stuff is it's got that kind of weird, wispy around the edges kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's almost
rock solid where it needs to be.
Yeah, but ethereal looking as well, right? Yeah. I don't know if we're reaching the limit of our articulation at this point, where you just have to look at the fucking art, right? And
go Google. If you don't know who Frazetta is, go Google Frazetta's art, because it's great. But
Then
and I do
then look up Chester the Molester after Frazetta.
yes, yes. Fine work in Hustler magazine uh, of the 80s. Um, but
See, I've
but yeah,
thrown you
anyway,
off now. Thrown you off your
yeah.
game when I
I was
mentioned
thinking about
Chester.
Chester.
Yeah. I have
And
a
what was
book
it?
all about
And Honey. Honey was the other one that used to run and beautifully painted. Um,
I have a book all about the Chester the Molester trial, actually, the which is quite interesting. And also it's a good way to I mean, it's quite I'm not sure if Fantagraphics are rushing to get out the collected Chester the Molester.
yes.
They might get into trouble. So it's a good way to see a reprint of some of those panels,
Right.
at least.
Um,
Right.
but
Is
but
there
yeah,
anything
I think, as I
left
said,
unsaid about Savage Sword of Conan?
no, but I just think like this is a period of comics history that I still find interesting. So later on, I may want to look at Creepy or Eerie as well, which were the kind of
Yeah, I'm
sister
interested in them.
horror comics, and you'll see a lot of the same artists showing up and writers too. You'll see Roy Thomas again. You'll see Alfredo Alcala. You'll see a lot of Filipino artists, and then South American artists tended to have styles that were slightly more baroque,
Mm,
slightly more like that lent themselves better to horror, maybe. And there wasn't really a
right.
place for them in your DC and your Marvel, but and also because the comics were slightly more edgy and
Yeah.
had
At some point,
sexier girls and
I'd like to do the Skywald horror comic stuff as well.
yeah,
Anyway, there's a whole load of stuff for us to get to,
yes,
and don't worry, we will, as long as our hearts beat by Crom, we will get to all of these comics in Bollixy, Prolixy style.
good time.
Yeah.
Yes. All
So,
right.
right. Until then, I've been Clive Davis, and he has been.
Nick.
Right. That's as far as you want to go with that one.
Oh yeah.
See you next time.